Hello, everyone out there in Facebook land. Hopefully we're recording live. So I'm Dr. Alana, Pure Pediatrics. Glad you can join us on this beautiful hump day. Is it Wednesday?
Yeah. I had to double check too. Yes, it is Wednesday.
A lot going on this week, so I've lost track of the days. I think it's hump day, so we're almost to the weekend. So today's topic, and I'm very happy to have Joanna Clark with Blissful Baby Sleep Coaching back with us today. And today's topic is sleep and your newborn. I know you're all exhausted. I mean, I'm tired. I don't even have a newborn. And so it turns out the average parent loses or only sleeps at best like 5 hours a night for the first year of life. And so today our goal is to figure out how to get some of those hours back. And honestly, the only way it works is if your baby actually sleeps. So we're very encouraged. We're gonna give you hopefully some really helpful tips. And if you have questions, feel free to comment. We'll try to answer them live. Otherwise, we will answer them afterwards. So Joanna, once again, thank you for joining us.
Yes.
All the way from California.
Yes, all the way from California. And, you know, the fires have been going on and it's everything the reporting is real. I'm currently safe, but we have ash everywhere and horrible air quality. So we don't have a beautiful day today, but we're safe and the firefighters are working really hard and we're so grateful for that.
I mean, 2020, what a year.
Yes.
So, well, okay, well, we are going to talk about baby sleep, so we'll have to be a little bit more positive. So babies can sleep, it turns out. This is actually news to some parents. Like, parents in my practice are like, what? They're supposed to sleep? Because I'm up all night, and I hear this all the time. And my best advice I give parents is that you don't wake up and eat steak in the middle of the night, and so your baby probably doesn't eat steak in the middle of the night either after a certain age or a certain weight. And they kind of learn this behavior. And so I feel like parents end up in this constant, well, the baby wakes up, so I feed the baby, and the baby has a hard time falling asleep at night, and how many naps, and we get so many questions. So we're going to record this. We're going to keep referring back to it. So I'm going to ask you some real specific questions that I know the parents ask me all the time.
Okay.
The question they ask me is, when can they reliably sleep train a baby?
Okay. So we're going to talk about this in the context of stages. And in the world of sleep science, the newborn phase is considered 0 to 6 months. It's a very long stage. After 0 to 6 months comes what we call the older baby phase, which is 6 to 12 months.
Right.
And then we move into toddler phase, which is, 12 to 18 months or 24 months. Okay. So right now, we're going to talk about what it looks like in the newborn phase, 0 to 6 months, and why that phase in the world of sleep science is really considered very different and needs to be treated differently than what you might do or think about doing with a 6 to 12 month old. So that's the first thing I want to make really infinitely clear, that newborn phase and newborn sleep is very, very different from the 6 to 12 month old guidelines that you might be referring to by accident right now. So one thing that happens to a lot of families that I'm talking to is they're Googling, doing Dr. Google in the middle of the night, and they're by accident reading suggestions and sleep expectations for an older baby, not a newborn. And so they are distraught and confused and burdened by the fact that their baby is not doing what they just read the article on, or that if they try something that the article recommended, that it's not working with their baby, when in fact it might be the thing that you're trying to employ is not even relevant to the age and stage of your baby. So the first big suggestion I'm just going to recommend is that for any parent that has a child between 0 and 6 months, make sure that anything you're reading is specifically about that particular month they're in or the number of weeks that they're in, because the recommendations or expectations are going to be very specific for that specific 20, what does a 22-week-old do versus what does a 10-week-old do, right? Because they are changing so rapidly. Every 2 weeks, they are changing. And so what a 10-week-old can do is very different from what a 16-week-old can do. And you need to be able to keep up with what those possibilities are.
I mean, the best example I give parents is that when we see a newborn baby, I mean, they are going to grow 10 inches this year. I mean, that's a crazy amount of growth. I mean,
Yes.
I think most of us would hope to gain, if I could grow 2 inches, I would in a heartbeat, but I'm done growing. But 10 inches is an amazing amount of growth. And so much of it is in those first 3 months. And so, babies sleep a lot during that time anyway, and they have to
Yes.
kind of frequently because their maximal growth velocity is really the first 3 months, and then it tapers a little bit the next 6 months, and then it really starts to taper off. So we're talking about tremendous growth that first 3 to 6 months. And I try to remind parents that these babies come out pretty helpless if you really think about it. They have basically newborn reflexes, and that's about it. Whereas a baby giraffe is born and like 5 minutes later it stands up,
I know.
walking around. I mean, it's gonna take your baby a whole year to get to the stands up and walks around stage. So it takes some patience as well. And sleep training is off the table completely
Y-
for these little newborns. So
Yes, exactly. So can kind of going back to like really saying, okay, where is my child within this newborn phase, right? So often, the reason why sleep is so erratic and incoherent and unpredictable in the newborn phase is exactly what Dr. Alana just referenced, is that there's such rapid cognitive and physical growth and physiological hormone balance that is trying to change on a daily basis. So there's two hormones that regulate sleep. There's melatonin, which is your drowsy hormone, and there is cortisol, which is your wakefulness hormone. And those two hormones in the first 6 months of life are really dramatically trying to physiological balance and regulate so that you can actually get longer, more consolidated sleep cycles. But while that hormone balance is trying to come online, you're going to see erratic patterns. And so that's something that families get really impatient with. And they say like, well, I read the book that at 8 weeks, my baby should be able to take a morning nap. Well, unfortunately, hormone regulation is not on this like minute by minute cycle. If you think about it, I often make this reference to families when as women, we go into puberty somewhere between like 11 years old and maybe 15 years old, and it's a hormone regulation issue that we cannot speed up or slow down in any way. You have to kind of look at the hormone regulation regarding sleep hormones and that physiological balance in the same way, that there's no way to force a newborn to go longer depending on where they are with that. But what I can tell you is that in the newborn phase, what typically happens is nighttime sleep will form up first around 8 weeks. So what you'll start to notice is a little bit longer stretches from the time they physically fall asleep at the onset of sleep to the time that they're going to maybe wake the next time, for which typically is a feed. You'll see it kind of stretch maybe closer to like 3 or 4 hours. That's kind of the first thing you'll notice. And then you'll also start to notice a morning nap window around 12 weeks. So that's where families start to see some relief, where they can start to see like, oh, I can tell when my baby's tired at bedtime, and I can reliably depend that they'll sleep X amount of time until their first feed. And then they'll also around 12 weeks see that, oh, that morning nap is becoming more regulated at a certain time. And I know that that morning nap, I might get at least 45 minutes. But the thing about newborn sleep is that they have, especially during the day, they are infamous for taking very short, frequent naps. So literally they will wake up in the morning and within 60 to 90 minutes, they will be ready for nap number one. And that nap number one can last as long as 20 minutes and last as long as 2 hours. And and I know it's frustrating, you guys. I know you're trying to plan your day and you're trying to give directions to daycare and nannies and all of this and try to coordinate and control. But unfortunately, the way to actually perceive and think about newborn sleep during the day is you want to, I call it filling the sleep tank. You kind of want to say to yourself, okay, how much daytime sleep should my child be getting from the time they wake up in the morning to the time that they have their last bedtime feed, right? And you kind of like call that a daytime shift. And on any given day, that daytime shift could be 11 hours or 13 hours, right? And then you say to yourself, okay, for this child at this age and stage, You know, I have let's say we're talking about an 8-week-old, you know, an 8-week-old needs anywhere between 3 to 6 naps, with each nap ranging as small as 20 minutes is up to 2 hours, and try to total to, you know, about 5 hours of daytime sleep between all of those naps added up. So that gives a lot of, when I explain it that way to a lot of moms, they kind of sit back and take a sigh of relief, because they're like, you mean I don't have to worry that every nap is an hour long? And I said, no, you can have a 30-minute nap, an hour nap, a 20-minute nap, then another hour nap. And as long as at the end of your daytime shift, you can look at your sleep log and you can say, wow, I did it. I got as close to whatever the sleep expectation is for that week, then you can feel really good about what you did for sleep. And the other thing I want to say is that you can absolutely hold them, rock them, nurse them down, stroller them, drive them. Again, newborn sleep, babies need a lot of care and comfort in order to go to sleep at the onset of sleep, but for all sleep cycles, and they need a lot of help going back to sleep, because they have, like what Dr. Alana referenced is, you know, this, the moral reflux, it breaks them up, or they might have reflux, which is a huge issue, which hopefully we'll touch on briefly. So there's so many reasons why these newborns would have sleep disruptions, which are all legit. It's not because you did anything wrong as a mom. It's more like, this is what newborn sleep looks like. And the more we can start to align the expectation, then the easier it is to attend to them appropriately.
And I've been taking copious notes, so because everyone asks all these questions. Okay.
Yes.
So by 12 weeks, morning nap should be pretty well established, where you at least know. And I think parents get a sense by 12 weeks. Babies cry, like they can tell, I'm hungry, I'm tired, I'm cranky, I'm fussy. I mean, they start to tell that.
Yes.
And so they're more regulated 3 to 6 naps around that time. And I think that's very true, because brand new newborns sleep all the time. And we tell you, you know, wake them up to feed them, because we actually want to keep their blood sugar steady.
Yes.
A lot of babies when they're born, their blood sugar is much lower than it normally would be. And so we want to keep their blood sugar steady. We want them to gain weight. Remember that maximal growth velocity is those first 3 months. And so, you know, we see them in the office several times before they're even a month old, just to make sure their head's growing perfectly, and their weight and everything. Because, you know, if your head doesn't grow, your brain doesn't grow. And that's super important.
Right.
So once they get past kind of that stage, so how old, or is there a certain weight? I mean, I know in my head what I normally tell parents, and you might feel differently. Most babies are ready for some semblance of, you know what, I think you can sleep through the night for the most part.
Okay. So kind of going back to what happens in the first 6 months. So in the first 6 months, the other thing that happens is they start doing one of their biggest developmental milestones, which is the rolling milestone. And that typically can happen as early, for some babies, as early as 3 to 4 months. What's more typical is around 5 months. And the rolling milestone is significant because that is where a baby will start to really orientate to their body and able to actually come to an understanding of their preferred sleeping position. So, you know, this is the tough part is that, you know, right now the philosophy is to keep the baby on their back, right? For safe sleeping. And, but not every baby prefers that sleeping position. And so what the benefit of the rolling milestone is not only do they start to have more physical control of their body, so we don't worry as much about SIDS because they can maneuver their body, but it also gives us a unique opportunity to consider some sleep coaching after they're comfortably rolling from front to back and back to front. That can kind of be one of the first signs of readiness that sleep training is possible. So before that, we call it sleep shaping, which is where we are really more targeting appropriate schedules, appropriate environments, tracking their wakefulness windows, becoming very aligned with their sleep cues before the onset of sleep, but we're still using sleep crutches. So the definition between sleep shaping and sleep shaping and sleep coaching is very specific. When you're sleep shaping, it's during the newborn phase, and you still are using a lot of support to help your baby go to sleep and go back to sleep. So you're still rocking, nursing, laying down with, strollering, etc., wearing. Oh my gosh, I love it. They love to be on you, and that's perfectly appropriate. But what you're doing is you're starting to understand your baby's rhythms and patterns so that when you go to offer some support at the onset of sleep, it's super easy. It takes like 5-10 minutes to have them go to sleep, and then they tend to have a more consolidated sleep cycle if you're nailing their sleep window. And then it kind of starts to set up a nice rhythm for your day. So your day starts to have a little bit, not necessarily like rigid schedule, but a more reliable pattern. So then you have a more realistic expectation of what to expect at night. And I should also tell you that if you're filling your sleep tank of your baby during the daytime shift, you're more likely going to have less arousals in the middle of the night. So again, as a newborn mom, if you were just to focus on one thing, because we know you're tired, it's hard to focus on lots of things. I would just simply focus on filling your child's sleep tank, and recognizing you can love on them and hold them and lay down with them, and that you're not going to be forming some awful sleep crutch that you're never going to be able to remove. Because sometimes if you try to do sleep training with a child too young, it literally does not work. Or it works for a little while, and then the rolling milestone comes and just removes all the hard work you did, and then you have to do it again. So that's another reason why I always recommend to kind of wait and hang back and look for more signs of readiness, because you don't want to have to do sleep training multiple times. And usually the babies that hormone balance we talked about earlier is more working in your favor. Like, we want to work with Mother Nature, right? We want to work with the natural circadian rhythms, and we want to work with the fact that they have more mobility to get in their preferred sleeping position when we think about sleep training. And sleep training, the definition is to remove the sleep crutches, or also known as negative sleep associations, which is anything that has to be done to or for a child at the onset of sleep at bedtime. They will typically want some version of that assistance at every arousal all night long.
Yes.
So that's kind of like the definition between sleep shaping and sleep training. And you don't have to worry about what you're doing in the newborn phase. You're not going to ruin anything, because you can always do sleep training and remove the sleep crutches in a very gentle way. Like, I am a gentle sleep coach. I don't believe in cry it out. So there are very supportive methodologies that you can use to help your child gently wean the sleep crutches while they're simultaneously learning their sleep skills, which is to self-regulate, self-settle, and self-soothe. And that's what sleep training is. Sleep training is removing the sleep crutches in order for the child to replace those with their own sleep skills, which is to regulate, settle, and soothe at the onset of sleep, so they can also do that in the middle of the night, and then they can do that for naps later.
Yes, one piece of advice I give parents when I feel like the baby's ready to sleep through the night is to start removing some of those crutches. Like, for example, you can tell your baby's tired, they've been fed, you have a schedule, they haven't had a super late nap, because that always backfires. Like, if you're napping at 7 p.m., that's not a nap. That was bedtime.
Right.
But to start putting the baby down while the baby's still a little bit awake. So, if you continue to always rock them to sleep and they're 9 months old, and then you tiptoe into the bedroom and put them in the crib, and then you tiptoe out of the room and hope for the best, they're definitely going to wake up, at least historically. But if they learn to fall asleep on their own, then when they wake up in the middle of the night, they're not like, how did I get here? I mean, this is, one of the jokes is, babies are always confused because they fall asleep and they wake up in Target.
Right. Yeah, exactly. It's true. It's true. We're all excited because we got them a drive nap.
Yeah.
And then they wake up at Target and they're all disoriented. Yes.
They're wondering why. I'm like, well, they're kind of freaked out because they're in Target.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. So just to pick up on that thought, like So in this sleep shaping mode, when you're in, one thing that you can work on is that babies can start to learn how to self-soothe and self-settle fairly early. And what I mean by that is you can start to see their abilities start to form up. They might not be perfect every day, but right around 12 weeks, if you have started to notice exactly when the morning nap is, and you've noticed that the morning nap is getting easier for you because you're like really nailing the sleep window, then sometimes you can put the baby down on the, in a bouncer or somewhere safe, and you can be near the child and just kind of observe what they do at that perfect sleep window and put them down drowsy but awake. One thing that families don't really understand what that means when people use that. So I'm going to give you a visual to maybe help clarify it. So I look at this as my sleepy scale. So 1 is your child's wide awake. 10 is your child's dead asleep after you rock them or nurse them. Okay. Ultimately, when your child's learning sleep skills, what they will do is you will put them in the crib drowsy but awake, 5 or 6 on the drowsy scale, so that they can begin to regulate, settle, and soothe themselves down the sleepy scale, so that at the moment that they're asleep, you have not done anything to or for them. They have literally walked themselves down the sleepy scale. Okay. So when a child goes into their independent sleep space too drowsy, like a lot of families will be like, well, I'm just going to rock my baby until they get, or, nurse them until they get really milk drunk. And I'm going to put them in their crib, at an 8.8 or a 9.5 level of drowsiness, and hope that they can just kind of finish themselves off and fall, into Dreamtown. In fact, that's when babies cry louder, longer, and harder, because they're so exhausted and they don't know how to practice their sleep skills yet. And so you're asking them to actually do it at the hardest time because they're so drowsy. They don't really have the emotional resilience to try something new. And so that's why in this newborn phase, really what your job is, my philosophy on the newborn phase is this: recover from your birth, bond with your baby, establish the nursing relationship if that's what you so choose to do, or develop your team of supporters. So your team of supporters would include your pediatrician, your lactation consultant, perhaps a counselor if there's some worry about postpartum depression or anxiety. And you guys are in Houston, there's amazing resources, and we'll make sure that that in some follow-up notes, we'll get that to you. There's some amazing resources for postpartum depression and anxiety in Houston. And you might want to think about, like, okay, when the timing is right, do I want to have a sleep coach, right? Or if I don't want to work with someone one-on-one, what resources can I go to that are reliable for me?
Not Dr. Google.
Not Dr. Google, right?
Just stop using Dr. Google because it's not very helpful for anything.
Right. And so again, what happens to a lot of moms is they're going to the wrong resources, and then trying things, they fail, and then the mother feels miserable about herself because it's not working, or she feels guilty because she tried something and it didn't work. And in fact, the origination point was not that she's a failure or that she did something wrong and that she has to feel guilty about it, but that the origination point of the material that she's referencing wasn't really the right material for her to try. So again, gathering kind of your resources, like for example, there's an amazing, I'll make sure that you guys get this too, a website called The Science of Mom. And that is a fabulous, reliable, accurate resource. Obviously, Academy of Pediatrics, fabulous, accurate, reliable resource. Going to mommy Facebook groups and posting your questions in there and hoping to get something that's going to make sense to you when the person knows nothing about your baby, nothing about your life, or you don't know anything about their life or their baby or their parenting philosophy, like that's a mismatch. And that's always a recipe for disaster, where moms start to compare and despair what they're experiencing in these Facebook groups. So I'm not, and what I mean by that is Facebook groups where you're asking for advice,
Yeah,
because you don't.
it's interesting. We even see it on the physician side. I mean, on Facebook, there are all these different groups, and like there's, one for pediatrics. I mean, there's a bazillion groups. Everyone knows this. But I'm really surprised sometimes by the questions that they ask. And sometimes when I see some of the questions, it's like a clinical question. And my first thought is, oh, you should probably contact one of, the expert in their field there in your city, because you're asking a hematology question. Go ahead and ask a hematologist. I know people ask me generic hematology questions all the time, so I'm always a little concerned when they just kind of throw out this question and the people responding aren't experts in that field. And then I'm like, I hope you're not making any clinical decisions.
Right.
And your justification is, well, I threw it out on this Facebook group. So in general, I just mute almost all of those unless there's something I'm looking for specifically, and
Right.
really don't pay attention to it. And some mommy groups, I think for support, it's super helpful. But I think anything that's really truly a question, reach out to your pediatrician. They're happy to send you in the right direction. I mean, this is what we love to do. We love people to ask us our opinion, especially on this kind of stuff. So call your doctor.
Yeah, exactly. Like, again, going back to like, who's your resource team? Like, I think it's so important, again, pediatrician, lactation consultant, postpartum counselor, maybe a doula or midwife that you'd worked with. You want to keep them on your team. A couple of key websites, are accurate, reliable places to go. And then research like a pediatric sleep expert that you want to start following and understanding and getting consistent feedback from them. Because if you're going to too many different sources, getting too many different feedback loops, all it's going to do is confuse you and make you feel depleted in your parenting. And we don't want that. The newborn phase is hard enough. We want to build encouragement and know that there's places you can go for accurate and reliable information.
And I think it's always important to note, just like with everything else in life, COVID, everything.
Yes.
We always say, my favorite new phrase is, we're all in the same storm, but a different boat. And that's exactly true for everything. And so I might give advice to a parent and they're like, okay, and they do it and it works. And I might give that same advice and they're like, oh, I tried it, I couldn't do it. And so then I usually say, well, here's a nice sleep coach who can really help you.
Yeah.
So to that end, I'm going to ask you more specifically about cried out, and I'm going to throw myself and my husband under the bus because we did the cried out method. But I give a disclaimer that my youngest is now 13 and my older two, I have 4 kids, and the older two, and I'm always a little shy to say this, but my older two were born in the 90s and pre-internet. I mean,
Yes.
really were born before Google. And I think that makes this huge difference in almost everything, because we just didn't have all this access to information. We literally bought a parenting book and then we took the advice of the pediatrician. So when my older two were little, the pediatrician and my oldest Trevor was, cute little chunk. And when we, showed up at that 2-month visit, he weighed 13 pounds easily. And the pediatrician said, hey, good news. Like, he doesn't need to eat steak in the middle of the night anymore. You're not in the middle of the night eating milk and cookies, are you? And I'm like, of course not. He goes, well, then you don't have to do that for your baby. Don't worry. He'll cry a couple times for a couple days when you put him to sleep, but then he'll sleep all the time. So we kind of just followed that for all of our kids. We invested in some good earbuds, and we would turn down the monitor so that we couldn't hear them, but we could see them. And then we watched a movie typically. And our routine, which I know you don't do at all, but I'll tell you what our routine was. And it works for me, but I feel like there's other gentler ways to do it. So I'm letting you learn from if I made any mistakes, but we would do whatever our nighttime routine is, and then when it was, time and we could tell, the baby had been fed, baby had been changed, baby was dry, we went into her room together and we would sing her a little song we made up. It was called Long Neck, Long Neck, Long Neck, got a giraffe. And then we would put the youngest, Alexi, for example, to sleep. We'd both kiss her goodnight and tell her we loved her. And then we said goodnight. And when we said goodnight, it was a totally different tone of voice than we'd used for everything else. And when we said goodnight, we turned around and we walked out the door. We shut the door. And then I will be honest, we heard some wailing on the other side of the door, and we said, "Oh, it should be fine." And then 3 nights later, when we kissed her goodnight, she just said, "Whew," and then she went to sleep. And we're
Mhm.
like, "Oh, we broke her," and so she's happy now. And none of our children ever, ever. I mean, I do not remember a single time when my children woke up and came to sleep in our bed. So we never had a child sleep in our bed as an infant, as a toddler, as a young, unless we had to share a bed in a hotel room, in which case I got kicked all night. Now we do have a dog who now my husband gave in, and the dog sleeps on my bed and kicks me, and then I wake up. So I'm a little bitter about Teddy. But other than Teddy, none of our children ever came and slept in our room. And we really attribute it to the fact that they honestly just learned sleep skills as infants, and that they didn't need us to be their crutch. And even when one of them ultimately had night terrors, we did go because we were like, oh, she's definitely having night terrors. But we kind of let it sort itself out and never removed her into our room.
Mhm.
So you don't do the cried out method, and I don't think it works for everyone. So I'm kind of glad that you don't. So tell me, and please don't tell me what's wrong with the cried out, because we did
Yeah.
very well. So I get it. But from your opinion, tell me more about the gentle sleep methods, because I would say most parents, when I tell them that story, they're like, "Oh, I can't do it," especially if it's a firstborn.
Right.
The second or third kid, they're like, "How early? Give me the instructions." Like by then, they're kind of like, "I'm on board." But tell me more about the gentle sleep methods so that I can tell my patients, "Okay, you don't have to be like me, but
Yes.
here's some methods you can use."
Yes. So, just to give a point of context so that everybody kind of understands kind of the evolution of sleep science, right? Because it's true, when Dr. Alana had her first baby, there was like very little sleep science in the pediatric population. And now, and I've been doing this for 10 years. So even the last 10 years has just exploded. I mean, if you don't see me on the phone with a client, you hear me listening to a webinar or something where I'm learning some new breakthrough or understanding of sleep cycles, which is really wonderful. So we can use all this new research on pediatric sleep science and behavioral science, and we can marry that together to have to kind of better meet the needs of the family values, but also still get the results, right? So ultimately what people want when they're thinking of sleep coaching their baby, the ultimate goal is, I'd really love my baby to have independent sleep. And what is defined when a mom says that to me, what she's really saying is, what I want is, I want to be able to put my baby either in the crib or even still in a co-sleeping environment, but I want to be able to put them in their independent sleep space, drowsy but awake, have them fall asleep without me doing anything. So no, I'll do a bedtime feed, but they go into that independent sleep space, drowsy but awake. I don't have to do anything. They fall asleep themselves, and then they stay asleep all night long. And if they have an arousal, they can get back to sleep themselves. And if I'm still a nursing mother, which many families are all the way up until, 2 years and 3 years of age, but if you choose to do a feed in the middle of the night, that the feed would land at a predictable time so that you could go and give that nutritional feed, nutritional nurse, or give a big, beautiful bottle and have the baby go back to sleep immediately. It was very easy and efficient, and you knew the nutritional needs were met by the child. So when a family says, I'm ready to sleep train, that's really what they're asking for. They're asking for bedtime to be easy. They're asking for quiet, peaceful nights. They're asking for consistency around the feeds, and they're asking for reliable naps that are also hands-free. Okay. So when you think about sleep training, there are basically 3 methodologies that you can do. You can do the extinction method, which is what Dr. Alana just referenced. That was, Dr. Weisbluth is the one that is the person that has that methodology. And so, yes, there are some families that are like, you know what? I can tell by the temperament of my child that that is actually going to be a better scenario for them, because my child will be too stimulated by my presence. And so Dr. Weisbluth has a fabulous book. And again, with any of these sleep training methodologies, what is so imperative is that this is not a decision you make tonight and then sleep train tonight. No, no, no. Really effective, lasting, long-term healthy sleep habits are learned skills, and you have to create the right environment and the right circumstances for your child to learn those skills. And so in order to learn, you have to prepare for the learning. And so, like I was talking about in the newborn sleep shaping phase, like understanding their sleep windows by using sleep logs is so important, because you can start to see what their rhythms and patterns are. You can start to see what their sleep cues are. And all of this information becomes critical before you start any kind of sleep training, because so many families will just go rogue. They'll be like, kind of like hear something from their cousin, read something on Google, talk to their best friend, and have a glass of wine, and then just be like, let's hope for the best.
Hey,
There's no hoping for the best. If you look at this as I'm trying to create the right environment for a learned skill, you wouldn't, like the analogy I make, and this might be a little shocking to people, but it's like this. Like the first time you choose to do swim lessons for your child, you're going to make sure that you have a really great instructor that knows how to work with babies. You're going to have a heated pool. You're probably going to make sure your child's well rested going into that first couple of swim lessons. You know, you're going to look at the time frames in which you're doing it. It's all very planned and executed so that you can have a successful experience. You would never just randomly take the baby to the YMCA with the indoor pool, with extra chlorinated water, with the kids splashing and jumping off the diving board, and then take your baby and plop them in the back in the cold 69-degree pool at the deep end and expect your child to swim. So when people randomly like just go, I'm going to sleep train tonight, I just can't take it anymore, and they just try it to see what happens, it's basically the equivalent of like the YMCA swimming pool analogy. And that's why the planning and preparation is so important. So you can do Weisbluth, which is extinction. You can do fading, which is Ferber, or you can do what's called the Sleep Lady Shuffle, or the chair method, which is Kim West. Now, I'm trained with Kim West, which is gentle sleep. It's also known as gentle sleep coaching, because a parent is physically in the room helping their child learn how to downregulate, settle, and soothe. Because again, the foundation is these are learned skills. So let's look at the creative ways that we can help that particular child learn how to downregulate, settle, and soothe on their own so that they don't need so many sleep props. And it's a very supportive process because you're in the room with the child helping them learn, and you're able to pick up and pat and shush and help. And you minimize the amount of help over the course of 7 to 10 days. So it's, you know, some people say trading time for tears. If you want this super fast, you would look at extinction, but there's still a lot of planning and preparation to do before you do that. But if you want to be more available to your child to help them through the learning process, then you might look at gentle sleep coaching, which is what I prefer to do. And most families today really want to be a part of that learning process with their child and witness the learning arc and get to know their child deeply in that way.
yes. So I was a parent of the 90s. So I feel like I can blame the 90s a little bit. But I will say, yeah, it was real short. It was like 3 days.
Mm-hmm.
It was planning and preparation. I mean, we had to buy the earplugs. And we had to choose early, and we had to wait till they weighed a certain amount. And then once we had all those things in plan, you know, completely went for it. But the key, I don't care which method parents use, and this is why I tell everyone all the time, you know, say you have a low potassium, there's a million ways I can fix that. It doesn't really matter in general, as long as I get it done and safely, right?
Right,
So
right.
harm, but the key is consistently, you know,
Yes.
the key is consistency. So even if it's potty training, if you are very inconsistent with what your plan is, and you try something for 1 day, 2 days, and then it doesn't work, and you're like, oh, so I'm gonna try something different, that never works.
Exactly.
You have to pick a method and reliably follow a plan. And if you're consistent and persistent, almost anything actually will work for doing almost anything.
Yes.
Practice makes perfect. But I mean, by your fourth child, you probably have perfected the art of it.
Yes. And I want to tag on that because what Dr. Alana just said is so important. Again, if you think about like, okay, am I ready to have my baby sleep independently? That's kind of the first question. Then the second question is getting in alignment and a unified front with your partner. This is not this is not mom solving this problem. This is a family decision, because oftentimes the dads can be unbelievably wonderful sleep coaches for their babies. And it's really scary for the moms to kind of, help kind of split and delegate. But in the end, it ends up being really beneficial. So the first thing is, do I want to sleep train? Is my baby ready? And that's, again, what you would be talking with your pediatrician about, readiness. And then my second thing is, am I in alignment with my husband about how we're going to do this? Have we researched the different extinction, fading, shuffle? Which methodology do we want? Then you have to go into the preparation mode. And usually when I'm working with my clients, their prep mode is at least 3 to 5 days before their night one of coaching. And they have a very specific checklist of all the things they need to have in alignment before their night one of coaching. Then when you go into coaching mode, it's literally like you need to be in that mode for at least 2 weeks from a consistency point of view before you move into any kind of like, now let's go on a trip, or now let's have the grandparents come over and take care of the child. Because again, learn skill. Like, you don't learn a skill in 3 days and have it cemented. Learn skills is practice, practice, practice till mastery. And so if you want lifelong sleep skills, you have to create some consistency around your methodology, again, as an aligned, unified parental unit, and move on. And that is how sleep coaching goes better. And then the methodology is based on your parenting values. And again, I'm a gentle sleep coach, so I don't believe in cry it out. And I believe that you can go, kind of divide it into smaller pieces and kind of scaffold the learning for the baby. So it takes a little bit longer, but you get to watch that scaffolding happen. So it's kind of neat. And, again, that preparation mode. I mean, I have a digital course called Prepping for Sleep Coaching Success, because it became so apparent to me when moms would come and they would say, I've tried everything and failed. I've tried everything and failed. And I say, okay, well, tell me what it was that you did, and tell me what you did before you started. And it was that haphazard analogy that I gave you. And so I realized that moms need more education around the appropriate preparation as it relates specifically to sleep science and behavioral science, because that's the foundation of everything I do, is rooted in science.
One other big reminder I'll give everyone is that babies always have sleep regressions.
Yes.
And just like, they're teething, they have a bad day. I mean, like, they can't talk. So if they could talk, they'd probably say, hey, I'm having a really bad day, or I'm super hungry today, and you just don't know it. So just keep that in mind, is that I think that sometimes parents kind of freak out a little bit when they got them to finally sleep through the night and everything's great. And then suddenly they're 9 months old and, oh no, that he woke up 3 times last night for the last 3 nights in a row. And then everyone's all distraught again. And they start going back to their old crutches.
Yes.
And so, I try to remind them, and I tell them, Joanna would say, minimize those crutches again and get right back on track. But I do definitely hear your point about, you don't want to do any sort of sleep training, potty training, anything when you're suddenly have a new baby in the house, or you're going on a vacation, or grandparents are coming. You're just going to set yourself up for a little bit of a disaster. So, patience is key.
Yes. And that's one thing about the regressions. Thank you for bringing that up. That's so important. So a fabulous resource that every mom needs to get is, I would get the app version of Wonder Weeks, as well as the hard copy book. This is an amazing, again, I think of, reliable resources, right? That's what we're trying to bring you here today, is what are the reliable resources for you? This is the newest version of the Wonder Weeks. And they also have an app, and it will tell you when the milestones are coming. This is life-changing for families, because you don't want to plan sleep training when your child's in a milestone because your sleep training won't work. And that's another thing that happens to a lot of families. I've tried everything. And I say, well, when was the last time you tried? And then we go compare to what the child's behaviors were. And we realize, oh my gosh, they were trying sleep training during a milestone. No wonder it didn't work, right? The other thing is that it's true. Sometimes we can sleep train and the baby starts like finally getting beautiful, blissful, consolidated sleep. And then a milestone literally is right behind that success. And the parents get really discouraged and they think that the sleep training didn't work. And I said, actually, it worked beautifully because your child's getting consolidated sleep. That milestone that was like hanging out in the background, waiting to come online, but it couldn't come online because your child had really disrupted sleep patterns. Once we got them sleeping, then that milestone came. So it's actually, as hard as it is to hit a milestone right after sleep training, it's actually like shows you how important that decision was and what a benefit it was to your child. And so you just help your baby through that milestone, which this book gives you tons of great suggestions. And then you go back to, you might have to do a little bit of sleep training again. If you had to integrate sleep crutches during the milestone, then you would go back and kind of clean up, if you will. And the baby usually within 3 days is right back to sleeping beautifully again. But yeah, don't be discouraged because that does happen a lot.
Don't be discouraged. Okay. Well, I think this is all useful information. I took a ton of notes, so hopefully I can pass on some of it to my patients. And just a reminder, ask your pediatrician. This is what we're here for. I love these questions, although I tell everyone my story and and I tell them there's other ways, but just pick a method and be consistent. And if you need to, get help because the baby sleeps through the night. You're gonna have a toddler who sleeps through the night. You're gonna have an elementary student who can sleep through the night. I will tell you, every family has some sort of problem at some point. Sleep has not been our problem, and we're really grateful for that because that's the one thing that we love was that everyone could go to sleep. So thank you again, Joanna, for joining us and agreeing. I know we're still planning to also talk about the teenagers because they are a totally different group other than the young students. It's really those high schoolers and those college students. And I feel like other than babies, the most questions I end up getting later is the teenagers who are having difficulty sleep and with their sleep patterns. So we look forward to hearing that soon. So thanks.
Yeah. So just a couple of closing remarks. Number one, for those of you that have children all the way up to 6 years of age, just please know you're never, ever too late to help your child learn sleep skills. Never too late. So I have a lot of families call me and they have a 5-year-old. Oh my gosh, I'm such a miserable mom. I've never dealt with this and I have to deal with it now. Can you help me? And the answer is absolutely yes. So please don't ever think you're too late. And that relates to the newborn phase, which is, your newborn phase, you're there to love on your baby and get to know each other and establish some sleep shaping behaviors. And then you can sleep train later when they have more readiness. And we will put together some resources for you so that you can, I put together an ages and stages chart for you guys that has kind of every 2-week interval during the newborn phase of what's possible so that you at least have an accurate guideline, and then kind of also ages and stages from 6 months going up until 6 years. So you know what you're aiming for. So you can definitely download that as an instant download. And then if any of you are just exhausted and you're like, I just need to talk to somebody about what's going on with my baby, you can contact me. I do 45-minute sleep strategy sessions where you get to talk to me and we look at the unique situation with your child and how to get better sleep. And I'm Joanna with Blissful Baby Sleep Coaching. And I'm passionate about this subject and passionate about mothers and fathers not being exhausted. I'm all about the well-rested family.
Yes.
So.
Us too. And all my patients have my cell phone, and so far, none of them are afraid to use it.
Yeah, especially during COVID. Exactly.
And that's the middle of the night because the baby's awake and they're awake and they're like, I have a question. I'm like, all right. Good thing I can fall asleep again really easily, but that's fine. That's what we're here for. So thank you again. We look forward to that. And bye, everyone in Facebook world.
Yes.
Have a beautiful rest of your day, and hopefully the fires will soon be under control. That whole West Coast is just being hammered. Sorry about that. So.
I know. Thank you, Dr. Alana. So great to